Evil gods have descended, plunging the world into an apocalypse of chaos as humans turn into zombies. As always, our MC is betrayed by his girlfriend and best friend, but he somehow magically travels back in time to change everything. Along with this, he gains the power to control flames and inherits a whole prison of evil gods at his disposal. In this prison, time stands still. He can store food without worrying about spoilage, and even keep animals and captives without fear of them escaping or starving to death. Let's find out how it all began. A blood moon rose above the ruined city. Amidst the rubble of the shattered metropolis, our MC, Zion, lay beaten, bloodied, and broken. In the distance, demons wreaked havoc without a single ounce of mercy for the population. With powerful strides and limbs capable of destroying skyscrapers, they tore through concrete like paper. Under the demon's command was an army of zombies, undead monsters hungry for human flesh. The few survivors clung desperately to the fading hope of survival, running for their lives. Zion was repeatedly trampled and kicked as he lay on the ground, a witch sneering at his misfortune. She began dousing his wounded body with gasoline, covering every inch. The witch and a caped villain bid him sarcastic farewells while flaunting their stolen treasures. The caped villain had taken the most precious thing Zion owned, the token of the 6 great hells. Zion looked up at the man he once called his best friend as the gasoline painfully stung his open wounds. Even in this moment, his only concern was the safety of his missing little sister. The villain activated the token, summoning the power of a monstrous bear adorned with a necklace made from the skulls of its victims. With a smug grin, the villain revealed that Zion's beloved little sister had already been dragged to her miserable end for being a nuisance, though her pure blood still had some useful purpose. As furious as Zion was, he lacked the strength to stand, let alone fight back. The retreating survivors looked to the villain with hope. They knew him as Shujun, the strongest ability user blessed by the gods. Taking the witch into his arms, Shujun flew away, leaving Zion with a cruel parting gift, a lit lighter aimed to burn him alive. Meanwhile, the giant demon continued its path of destruction until it clashed with the summoned bear, which had been unleashed from its restraints. The gargantuan beasts wrestled in a full-on kaiju battle as Zion's body was consumed by the flames. He gritted his teeth against the agonizing sensation of his skin being burned to a crisp, desperately wishing for a do-over. Sheyin vowed that if the afterlife existed, he wouldn't let those who wronged him go unscathed. Fueled by hatred and agony, his right eye assimilated with the flames as he heard a playful voice granting him his wish. His heartbeat slowed to a crawl, and with one final pump, the flow of time reversed. The fiery power coalesced in his eye, imprinting the physical and emotional pain he felt onto his soul. Xiaoyan woke up in the comfort of his own bed, sweating as if from a long and feverish nightmare. The wounds and burns were gone. Could the voice he heard on the brink of death be real? He rummaged around the bed and found his phone. The date read July 1st, 2028, 3 whole days before the apocalypse began. Throwing on a shirt, he ran to the bathroom to sober up and make sense of what he had just experienced. He still couldn't believe everything had started over. He felt normal and healthy, the only difference being a change in his right eye, which had turned pale golden color due to the fire seed left buried within him when he was burned to death. He quickly took a moment to calm down and adapted to the situation surprisingly fast. He suited up and stepped outside, taking in the sights. His neighborhood wasn't necessarily pretty, but it would look much worse 3 days from now. The apocalypse would arrive, turning many humans into zombies, accompanied by the descent of strange gods. Some humans would awaken powers to stand up for themselves, but resistance would ultimately be futile. Cities would become hellscapes overrun by demons, with the few survivors fighting for limited resources to survive. His girlfriend, the witch Rulin, and his best friend, the traitorous Shijuan, would betray him without batting an eye. Speaking of the literal devil, Rulin started calling him. Cheyenne picked up the phone, and her shrill voice immediately blared through. She criticized him for not answering right away, questioning if he was trying to break up with her. Rulin had always been like this. Whenever things didn't go her way, she threatened to end the relationship. In the past, his foolish and pathetic self would have anxiously tried to appease her, but now he couldn't care less. He simply responded with "sure," confusing the witch, who expected him to beg for forgiveness like a puppy. Finally, Xia Yin had had enough. He broke it off with Rulin, tired of her conniving ways. He didn't want to be a glorified servant anymore. He hung up and tucked his phone in his pocket, gaining some semblance of peace. He knew he had to hurry and take care of business during his limited time back. Meanwhile, in Rulin's home, she angrily threw her phone away after being cut off before she could start cursing Xia Yin out. Her dog had the gall to hang up and block her so quickly. The witch and Shijuan had just finished a round of smashing. He asked if Xia Yin had finally found out about their little fling, but that shouldn't be possible. Rulin had the loser on a leash, never disobeying her orders and demands. Shijuan just laughed, not caring either way. He was more concerned about a message from his old man about collecting ancient family heirlooms filled with spiritual energy, as something big might happen soon. Rulin remembered her loser boyfriend mentioning a family heirloom token before recalling that the ugly, centuries-old artifact was currently owned by Shine's sister. She believed her dog would always come back to her for forgiveness. At that moment, she would just demand the token. Pleased by his ingenuity, Shijuan straddled the witch, and they went for another round of hide the sausage. The token they were discussing was a poorly maintained slab of antique. 11 Yin had rushed over 30 kilometers in a cab to his sister's school to ask for the token, ditching his day job. Shiyin asked what was wrong with his eyes, but he refused to explain. Instead, he asked his little sister if she trusted her big bro. They had been incredibly close since childhood, so of course she did. The two had always relied on each other growing up. If there was one person Shiyin would trust unconditionally, it would be her. She knew everything he did was for her own good. With that in mind, Zion tasked her with packing her things and coming with him immediately. She obliged, asking for 2 hours to prepare. Zion wondered why she didn't ask for more explanation. As she ran off to pack her things, he vowed to ensure that Yin would be safe and sound this time. To do that, he would need the family heirloom resting in his palm. All he could remember was Shijuan opening some sort of portal and summoning a giant beast using that rusty old thing. He wondered how that snake had managed to perform such a mythical feat suddenly. The fire seed in his golden eye shot out and hit the token's surface. The heat from the fire melted the rusty exterior, revealing the token's original form, an ancient artifact connected to the sixth great hell. Zion was suddenly sucked into a wormhole of sorts, traveling inside the token's separate dimension. The portal eventually spat him out into an entirely different realm, filled with perpetual darkness. In the center stood a giant tower with countless crimson chains extending in every direction. He struggled to find words to describe what he was witnessing. Inside the tower was a plethora of monsters and demons from all sorts of eras, locked up and desperate to escape. They all gazed at him with penetrating stares as he descended toward the entrance. The monsters and demons tried to scare him with their snarls and glares, and it was surprisingly effective. Then, a lightning tribulation struck the tower with an ungodly amount of force, seemingly aimed at the monsters who dared to intimidate Zion. Each one suffered a painful demise as the destructive power mutilated their grotesque bodies. The chaotic tribulation continued, seemingly connecting to Zion himself, as a mysterious power suppressed the monsters within the tower. Right then, he heard the same playful voice he had heard before his life was snuffed out and time reversed. The mysterious entity's lips curved into a smile, revealing her fangs. Zion's guard immediately went up as he stared at the humanoid creature before him. She introduced herself as Sadaji, a beautiful nine-tailed fox, and extended a respectful greeting to Zion, the new Hell's prison warden. You see, tens of thousands of years ago, the immortal emperor gathered 12 immortals, Taibi, Tang, the three pure ones, Guanin, Fuki, Shanu, and others, to jointly forge the demon-suppressing tower. The finished product was dubbed the Sixth Great Hell, the nightmare of every evil entity throughout the ages. All sorts of powerful beasts, monsters, and demons were locked away for their grievous sins in the Tower of Endless Punishment, suffering the torment of soul-burning, heavenly lightning day and night. The pardon token in Shine's hand was the only key that could unlock the door to this fearsome place. That's why Sadaji referred to him as the new warden. Since it was his first time in this realm, the fox invited him inside to check on his prisoners and promised to give him a more detailed report about the place. As they walked through the tower, curious and intrigued by what it all meant, Zion accepted her invitation and approached the ominous door as if he had nothing to lose. Upon entering, he was greeted by the swift weaving of violent energy bouncing around the first floor. Sadaji warned him to be careful of those dancing waves. Instinctively, his golden eye lit up, summoning a seemingly conscious trail of fire that protected him from the malevolent energy. Sadaji was impressed with how efficiently he handled the tower's first surprise. She identified the flame in his eyes as the nether fire seed, which must be the catalyst that made it possible for him to restart his life after death in the underworld. Sadaji also confessed that she had contacted him as his life flickered away. The bond between the fox and the Zia family ran deep. She had been the guiding spirit of the Sixth Great Hell for a long time and couldn't bear to see Zion killed by pathetic villains. The despair and anger he felt at the moment of death must have awakened his flame ability, igniting the nether fire seed. She barely had to do anything to help him. That was one big question answered. Now that the apocalypse was inching closer once more, he wouldn't be as useless and helpless as he was in the past. This time, he was determined to do everything differently. Eager to learn more about the tower, Zion asked Sadaji to proceed and lead the way. She explained that the Sixth Great Hell was divided into 5 layers based on Zion's soul power. The doors to another floor would light up, representing his current limit. The higher he could go, the stronger imprisoned creatures he could encounter. So he needed to increase his soul power quickly to face them. Right now, only the ground floor was lit, and the only accessible area was behind the prison cell. There, he encountered a familiar, terrifying figure, the same gigantic beast that Shujun had summoned and ridden in his previous life. Curiosity got the better of Zion, and they walked a little too close to the prison cell, waking the monster, which roared a terrifying war cry. What happened next shocked him to his core. The monstrous beast started acting like a cuddly pet, seemingly pleased to see the new warden of the prison. It praised Zion for being young and promising, explaining that the prisoners of the tower had been waiting for a new warden to arrive for thousands of years. The beast even offered its services if Zion ever needed anything. The shameless black bear even tried to sneak a kiss, but was kicked away by Sadaji for daring to get close to the warden. It turned out the fox just wanted to be the first to shower Zion with affection. She didn't want any competition for the warden's attention, and complained that these 1,000-year-old demon kings had only been imprisoned for a few thousand years and had already turned into attention-hungry dogs. However, not everyone was like the black bear. Some of the prisoners disapproved of the young warden, relying solely on his token. The chained-up bird-like demon would rather endure heavenly lightning for another 1,000 years than grovel at the feet of a kid. With Sadaji and the black bear included, it seemed the tower held an untold number of legendary creatures. Zion let his eyes wander until they fell on the black bear's next-door neighbor. He could see the demon's back, a muscular body with demonic wings attached. The demon turned around, revealing its humanoid face with a sharp beak. He recognized the demon from ancient stories and myths. The thunder god, Legenji. Sadaji praised Zion for immediately recognizing another prisoner at a glance. She clarified that in this world, monsters are ranked as soldiers, generals, commanders, kings, sages, and beyond. Since Zion only had access to the lowest level of the tower, he could only see general-level criminals. The stronger he became and the higher he ascended, the stronger the prisoners he could encounter. It was said that the topmost layer even held sage-level immortal criminals. Sadaji had heard from Lady Nuasai about how they once held god-level beings in the tower, but they had been lost to the sands of time. The fox urged the young warden to work hard and ascend the ranks to control the entire prison. Zion was more than a little overwhelmed by the scale of this responsibility. The tower was more formidable than anything his mind could have imagined. The general-level beasts on the lowest level were already powerful enough to cause ruinous amounts of destruction with their power. The prisoners on the top floor must be world-ending nightmares. However, no matter what abominations were locked up on top, they would all just be prisoners under the warden's control in the future. In the coming apocalypse, he had the potential to become the strongest with his minuscule soul power. This was as far as they could go for now. Zion would have to absorb a lot more soul power to light up more rooms and ascend. Sadaji also explained that soul power was different from awakened abilities. Abilities could be strengthened by absorbing crystal cores from zombies and mutants, while soul power could only be obtained by killing gods. In 3 days, when those deities descended upon Earth, his hunt would officially begin. Before eradicating the gods, he needed to make all the necessary preparations. Suddenly, Zion found himself in the busy antique street of his previous life. Someone had stumbled upon a binding immortal rope from one of the stalls and became a powerful ability user. At this point in time, the treasure should still be for sale on this street. Thankfully, the energy radiating from the antique display could not escape his nether fire seed. Coincidentally, the head of the Song family and father of Shujun, Song Tian, was also roaming the streets to shop with Elder Hang, his trusted antique appraiser. Song Tian spotted Zion looking around the stalls and was confused by the young man's interest in the wares. He remembered reminding his son to pick friends that would be useful in one way or another, and Shujun assured him that Zion was just a foolishly loyal guy who was easy to manipulate. Song Tian did not pay the young man too much attention and continued their search for valuable antiques. Elder Hang assured him that with his discerning eyes, they could get a decent haul. It was too bad that most antiques on display were useless. Song Tian had just returned from an ancestral worship ceremony where he dreamed of his ancestors telling him to search for ancient artifacts. He didn't know what for, but he decided to give it a go. Suddenly, Elder Hang lit up at the sight of a gourd tied to the door of one of the antique shops. The old man immediately ran to snag it, but someone else had already gotten to it. The shop owner was glad to find another gullible customer he could scam, but that gullible customer was Zion. The owner spouted some nonsense about the gourd being an artifact from the Ming Dynasty and set the price at 10,000. Zion immediately recoiled at such an expensive price tag. The young man pretended to inspect the gourd for any damage or peculiarities, arguing that the gourd had cracks and was tied with a cheap broken string. He started haggling for the antique, setting his price at 100 yen at most. The shop owner immediately grabbed the gourd out of his hands and told him to piss off. At that moment, Elder Hang and Song Tian swooped in to inspect the antique for themselves, not knowing that Zion had already received the treasure for free. It was the shoddy red string tied around the gourd. No one could have thought that the inconspicuous little string would become so valuable in the coming days. It was the magical treasure dubbed the Binding Immortal Rope. He was only able to spot it thanks to his nether fire seed vision, quietly tucking the magical treasure into his pockets. He decided to stick around for a bit of fun and do some trolling. In his previous life, his little sister had been captured by the Song family after stealing a token. They used her as a blood sacrifice for some twisted ritual. This time, Big Bro was hell-bent on making the whole Song clan pay. Elder Hang verified that the gourd had a faint spiritual aura of ancient origin. He must have sensed the remnant power of the string. Trusting the old man's vision, Song Tian asked for the price of the gourd. Zion slightly interrupted and called Uncle Song's attention with a polite greeting. Uncle Song returned the greeting and made some small talk. The shrewd businessman even brought up the ancient heirloom that Zion had, saying he wanted to discuss possibly acquiring it later. In reply to that bold proposal, Zion raised his voice and dropped the wealthy Song title as loud as he could to attract everyone's attention. He strongly implied that Uncle Song must be trying to buy something very valuable. With the streets full of enthusiasts trying to strike it rich in Antique Street, a crowd of fanatics quickly surrounded the stall, eager to see the famous Elder Hang, the appraiser. The hungry hyenas quickly offered a higher initial price than 10,000 for the gourd. Uncle Song was irked by the ensuing bidding war, asserting that he had found the treasure first. The bid quickly reached 20,000, and antique enthusiasts drove the price up to 50,000 in the blink of an eye, as the shopkeeper encouraged the bidding war to line his pockets. By the end of the brutal auction, Uncle Song had to pay 70,000, more than the asking price. He was supposed to acquire a possible treasure for just 10,000, but ended up overpaying because of Zion's stunt. The young man stuck around to talk to Song Tian about his family heirloom. Uncle Song remained civil and asked the young man to see the token. Zion quickly took it out of his pocket and willingly let them see it from afar. Elder Hang could already tell that the token was a real treasure and wanted to take a closer look to confirm. However, Zion quickly put the token back into his pocket and denied their request for a closer look. Uncle Song tried to appeal to Zion's friendship with his son, asking for a favor for his dear old uncle. Zion asserted that he had nothing to do with Shujun anymore, and if there was nothing else, he would take his leave. Finally, Uncle Song offered compensation just for inspecting the artifact. Zion took out his phone, showed them his PayPal ID, and asked for 10,000 for a 1-minute inspection. He could give them 5 minutes for a thorough look in exchange for 50,000. Uncle Song gritted his teeth and gave in. He was just getting scammed left and right. Uncle Song begrudgingly transferred the money over, and the young man tossed the token to Elder Hang. While the suckers inspected every nook and cranny of the artifact, Zion was already busy spending his cash. He ordered an ample stock of water and food since there were empty cells in the 6th Great Hell Prison where he could store his supplies. Sadaji informed him that any item placed in a separate dimension would remain unchanged. He could even store some live animals there. So, she requested some chickens to snack on. She was a fox after all. He bought so many essential supplies, from raw ingredients to perishables, that the vendors might have thought he was starting a farm. It didn't take long for him to run out of funds. Money really does run out quickly these days. After 5 minutes, he asked the old duo if they wanted to buy some time extension, but Uncle Song was already sold. He wanted to buy the token for himself. When the young man responded that he was open to selling, the old men lit up with glee, but the price point he set was way too high. Zion started negotiations at 10 million, and the glee on their faces vanished in an instant. Zion quickly retrieved the token and asserted that it was an heirloom that had been passed through his family for thousands of years. He believed that 10 million was a fair price, but was just giving them an unrealistic offer. With that said, he took his leave. Elder Hang believed that the token was a genuine antique, but it should only be worth around 500,000. The old appraiser thought he could get the token for 100,000 if they negotiated, but Uncle Song was done with reasonable methods. He thanked Elder Hang for his help and asked him to take his leave. The ruthless business mogul called his son, Shijun, and ordered him to gather some clan members to find Zion and his sister. He wanted the token and the siblings in one piece. That brat dared to mess with him for the whole day. As revenge, he would do as his ancestors asked and prepare a young girl's blood for sacrifice. Shujun just happened to be the perfect candidate. Zion could already tell that Uncle Song was plotting his disgusting revenge, which was precisely what he had been hoping for. He even regretted not extorting more money from the bastard. Zion was just getting started with collecting debts for the Song family's transgressions. The young man went straight to his little sister's dorm and found Xia Yin waiting for him outside. She was all packed and ready to go. He took her luggage, ready to finally head home for the day. Before they could leave, a pretty woman with platinum hair came running in to stop the siblings. She must have run all the way, given how disheveled she looked. This was Shiyun's homeroom teacher, Miss B. Trying to catch her breath, she asked why Shiyun suddenly got up and left school, especially with an exam the next day, an exam crucial for her future. Shiyun introduced himself to the teacher and confessed that he was the one pulling his sister out of school for a temporary leave. Miss B argued that Shiyun was the top student in her class. She knew that the siblings' parents had passed away, leaving Shiyun to take care of his sister. Miss B expected him to be a responsible guardian, not the type to strain his sister's future. She refused to let her most promising student go without a valid reason, believing Shiyun had a bright future ahead and that Xiaoyan was ruining it. The passionate teacher firmly believed that as long as the earth wasn't exploding, Shiyun should not take this temporary leave for whatever reason. Miss B quickly realized she had crossed a line with her words, but she was just concerned for her prized student. Feeling bad for intruding on family matters, she still insisted on continuing Shiyun's education. Shiyun took it pretty well, thanking Miss B for looking out for his sister's best interests. As a token of his gratitude, he gave the teacher some valuable advice. With a serious tone, he advised her to stock up on as much food, water, medicine, and weapons as soon as she could. Most importantly, she should prepare a large supply of painkillers to help her get through the tough times ahead. Miss B was surprised by the grim implications of his advice. It was as if he was saying the world was really going to end in the coming days. Left stunned in silence, the siblings went on their way back home. Inside Cheyenne home, Cheyenne asked her big brother what the plan was now that she was there. She wasn't naive. She knew that her brother must be preparing for something big that was about to happen. He openly admitted that there would be some drastic changes in the coming days, but swore to protect her with all his might. He fashioned the token into a necklace and made Shuyun wear it while he went out for a bit, asking her never to open the door for anyone, no matter what. Shuyun kept her cheerful attitude, promising her big brother a hearty meal when he returned. The token around her neck would allow Cheyenne to sense her whereabouts at any time. For now, he needed more funds as soon as possible. As Cheyenne got out of the elevator, he noticed the witch waiting for him in the lobby. She was on a call with someone, blatantly talking about the siblings with an irate tone. On the other side of the line was that snake, Shujun, telling Rulin to keep the loser occupied while he and his boys did their thing. Seeing that Cheyenne had finally shown his face, the witch tried to use her feminine charm and invited him to grab a late-night snack with her, like old times. Cheyenne didn't want to waste another breath with this witch, so he shoved her out of the way. But Rulin was either extremely persistent or just couldn't read the room. She grabbed his arm and asked if they were really breaking up after everything they'd been through. She thought he was just being childishly jealous about something, so she came all the way out here to see him. Cheyenne pushed her once more. Just the thought of ever being in a relationship with her made him sick. He warned her to stay the hell away from him from now on. Rulin went on the offensive, calling him ungrateful. Her words no longer held any power over him as he exited the building, leaving the conniving witch behind. Rulin's ego was shattered, and she quickly reverted to being the demanding waste of space that she was. Cheyenne waved the deed to his house in the air, telling her that he was going to sell it. The witch panicked. She had been expecting to get the place once they got married, having long viewed it as their wedding house. Not only was Cheyenne going to sell it, but he planned to sell it way below market price too. Cheyenne's behavior didn't make any sense. He was standing up for himself now, and yet he was selling a house left by his parents. It was in a prime location, worth at least $3 million. That house was her end goal. That's why she dated him. Quickly thinking on her feet, Rulin returned to her gentle demeanor and asked how much he would sell the property for to make the process easier and quicker. He was going to put it up for just $1 million. Rulin was flabbergasted, thinking that Cheyenne must be in some sort of trouble and needed to sell the house to pay off debts. He continued dangling the prospect of selling such a good property for such a low price in front of her. She wanted to buy it for herself, but she didn't have the funds to do so yet. All she could offer him was $300,000 up front and pay the rest later. That was a no-go, though. Cheyenne wasn't looking for an installment plan. He wanted $1 million in cold hard cash. Rulin considered the factors. She knew that Shujun was about to mess with the siblings, and Cheyenne was as good as dead anyway. Even if the witch gave him $1 million, it would all come back to her. All she needed to do was trick him into completing the property transfer. Finally, the witch caved in and agreed to a deal, inviting him to the real estate office ASAP. At the real estate office, Rulin hopped on a call with her mom to secure the rest of the cash, assuring her that the money would come back without a fuss. Her mother criticized her for dating a broke boy to the point of spending her own money and family savings to buy his house. The witch nearly cursed her mom out, but managed to keep it together. She was still thinking that Cheyenne would be gone for good very soon. Getting impatient, the young man urged Rulin to hurry up with the payment so he could sign the property over. The witch thought he was falling right into her financial trap. Little did she know she was falling into his instead. When the apocalypse finally descended, every property on the planet would lose all its value. Without the $1 million in her personal and family savings, Rulin would have nothing and would lose her last chance at survival. All smiles as the deal was completed. The witch even invited him back to her house to celebrate. This time, Cheyenne did not turn down her invitation. As the sun set, Shujun and his goons walked around the back of the residential building with weapons in hand. Before Cheyenne returned, they intended to go upstairs for a very deep conversation with his sister. The poor girl was upstairs diligently preparing a meal for her brother, unaware of what was about to happen. Unbeknownst to her, the token pendant she wore on her neck started emitting a strange energy. Soon, the group of bandits, led by Shujun, stood right in front of the apartment door. The bastard knocked and called out to Shuyun, hoping she would open the door for him since he was her brother's friend. Hearing the knock, Shuyun approached the door, but wasn't in a hurry to open it. Even though she recognized Shujun's voice, she told him that her brother wasn't home and asked why he was there. He laughed in his usual manner and replied that he already knew about it. The bastard assured her that her brother had gone to buy ingredients for dinner while he had been asked to return home first. His words seemed believable to Shuyun, as she had no idea what was waiting for her on the other side of the door. Unconsciously, she reached for the door, but suddenly she remembered her brother's warning not to open the door for anyone. His words instantly made her change her mind. She trusted him more than anyone else. Turning to Shujun, she told him he would have to wait until her brother returned. Her answer made the bastard furious. His friendly mask evaporated, and his tone became irritated. He pretended to be offended because she feared and distrusted him and began to demand that Shuyun immediately open the door. But this behavior only made things worse, convincing Shuyun even more that she should not open the door. Realizing his plan had failed, Shujun decided to resort to more drastic measures. One of his friends had brought a box of tools, and they were going to use them to get inside the apartment. For guys with criminal backgrounds, picking locks was not new, and a lock like this should have fallen in minutes. While his friend worked on the lock, Shujun started asking Shuyun if the symbol of their family belonged to her. Unaware, she replied that her brother had just put it on her. The bastard's question didn't make much sense. His only purpose was to distract her while his gang broke the lock. Soon, they succeeded, and the very next moment, a bunch of scumbags with bats rushed inside. Isn't it a bit much to invade the home of a defenseless girl? Next time, they should get a bigger gang to be sure. Then, everything went as expected. They grabbed Shuyun, and Shujun started insulting her. He began talking about how it would have been over a lot faster if she'd opened the door first. He felt like a god now because he had the relic his father wanted, as well as Shuyun's sister. All that remained was to bring that insolent bastard to his knees and make him apologize. After freeing herself from Shujun's grip, Shuyun began to ask why he was doing this, especially since she thought he was her brother's friend. Shujun had no intention of hiding anything. He replied with a crazy smile that he was only friends with her brother because he was a naive fool who was very easy to manipulate. He didn't even hide the fact that he had done many dirty things, planning to blame them all on Shuyun. Shuyun couldn't believe it, but the reality was cruel. Shujun turned out to be a real bastard, bragging about his vile deeds, including his relationship with her brother's girlfriend. His touches were disgusting, and Shuyun demanded to be let go. However, her words only made things worse. In response to her plea, the bastard slapped her face, telling her not to even think of screaming. Otherwise, he threatened to gag her with his socks. Shujun's friends were just as scummy as he was, asking if Shuyun was of proper age, to which he replied that they could check for themselves. Who knows what might have happened next if it weren't for someone's sudden laughter. The owner of the laughter turned to the guys and asked if they had ever heard of the Wine Lake and Meat Forest. Immediately after those words, the surroundings seemed to magically change. Just moments later, the guys found themselves in a lake surrounded by beautiful girls. The atmosphere was so enchanting that they had no questions about how they got there. It was literally a heavenly place, or at least it seemed so at first glance. The girls kept hugging them, giving them meat, and calling them kings. When asked if they liked the meat, the guys said it was incredibly delicious. Nothing seemed to portend trouble, but suddenly the atmosphere shifted. A white-haired girl with a sinister smile declared that the meat they were eating was their own. Right after that, all the girls suddenly vanished, and the water in the lake turned blood-colored. The blissful smiles on the bastards' faces shifted to fear and terror. The paradise they were in had transformed into a real hell. Sadaji, who had created all this on purpose, asked if they didn't like the menu. While these wretched bastards' minds were imprisoned in a world of illusion, in reality, they were writhing in agony. They didn't even realize that their punishment had just begun. Shuyun watched from the sidelines, unaware of what was happening. Finally, the bastards came to their senses, terrified at the sight of a ghost, but they still couldn't understand where the illusion ended and reality began. Shujun held up better than the others, but he too didn't understand the origin of the ghostly illusion. He and his gang had killed many innocent souls, but for the first time, they felt fear and hesitation in front of this little girl. Then an idea struck him. The reason for their fear could be the strange token. Shijun took it out and began yelling at it, calling it broken old trash that couldn't harm him in any way. However, the power contained within the token thought otherwise. A clawed paw emerged from it, quickly making Shijun realize who the real trash was by leaving deep cuts on his face. The bastard screamed in pain and dropped the token, which rolled across the floor, finally coming to rest at Xiaoyan's feet. Our hero picked it up and entered his apartment, returning just in time to witness the wretched criminals and punish them properly. The Shijun gang immediately recognized how much trouble they were in, but then the witch Rulin appeared, demanding an explanation for what was going on. As soon as she saw the injured Shijun, she rushed over to him. The rest of the gang began to come to their senses, and Shijun ordered them not to let our hero leave with the treasure. Xiaoyan only had time to warn her brother to be careful. Confident in their numerical advantage and armed with bats, the bastards moved forward, attacking all at once, hoping for a quick victory. But our hero stood still. He wasn't afraid of these losers at all. However, there was a problem. Sadaji had warned him about the Raven General, who had used his power to strike Shun's face with his claw, but he did so without Xiaoyan's permission and exhausted all of his token power. The Bear General was upset that he couldn't appear and show his power, but our hero was pleased. If he had shown up, the house would have definitely been destroyed. This apartment was too small a stage for such powerful creatures. Their turn would come later. He could easily deal with this bunch of losers with his own strength. Xiaoyan didn't even have to lift a finger. Flames shot directly at these scumbags. The burning thugs didn't realize what was happening. This was the first time they had encountered such incredible power. It was as if the fire was intelligent. Nothing in the room was burning except the thugs themselves. The flames were incredibly hot, and no matter how hard they tried to roll around on the floor, they couldn't extinguish them. Even water was useless, no matter how much these losers looked to it for salvation. The flames were only extinguished when they fell dead. This was the first time Shijun and Rulin had seen such a thing, and they were at a loss for words. Now, the main bastard, Shijun, was truly afraid for his own skin. He had no idea that Xiaoyan could use magic. The frightened witch Rulin begged Xiaoyan to stay away from them and reminded him that Shijun was his best friend and she was his girlfriend. Our hero was in no mood to show mercy to such trash. Shijun had dared to come to his house, taken his sister hostage, and tried to steal a token, while Rulin, the disgusting witch, had acted to distract and delay him. Just looking at them made Xiaoyan sick, and they still dared to reminisce about their old friendship. Shijun stood up and started playing the most innocent person in the world, pretending not to understand what Xiaoyan was talking about. At the same time, he quietly whispered to Rulin to distract our hero, since she was his girlfriend. Shijun himself took out a knife from behind his back and continued to prattle about how he couldn't wait to be the best man at Rulin and Xiaoyan's wedding. Rulin began to play along, asking our hero to marry her. She was even ready to forgive him for having nothing. Wasn't that true love? The only thing she wanted to know was how he gained such power, and then she would love him forever. At first, it seemed her spell had worked, and Shijun saw it as an opportunity to make a sneak attack, but it was all useless. Xiaoyan could easily see their real intentions through their cheap game. Therefore, he was ready to deal with them right then and there. A stream of flames from his eyes captured the rotten couple, purifying this world a little before the apocalypse. Watching the flames, our hero reflected on why he had received this power, and realized it was all to cleanse the world of filthy creatures like Shijun and Rulin. He would scorch all such filth from the face of the planet. Meanwhile, at the Song family's estate, their entire clan gathered to witness the clan leader address the ancestors. Song bowed before the altar and began to ask for blessings and assistance to ensure their wealth would become limitless. The spirit of the ancestors appeared from the altar, demanding ancient spiritual artifacts and the blood of a girl in return. The pitiful ancient flask that Mr. Song had acquired so dearly did not satisfy the spirit at all. They wanted a real sacrifice and genuine artifacts. Mr. Song began to promise that there was nothing to worry about. In just a few minutes, Shijun would arrive with the girl and the artifact. But the spirit was furious that it had to wait for such ungrateful descendants. Despite its anger, it had a message for them. A worldwide apocalypse is coming in 3 days. This sounded incredible to Mr. Song, but he couldn't doubt the words of the ancestor spirit. Therefore, he immediately called out to his clan, urging them to send all their manpower and resources to buy up water and food in large quantities. If what the ancestor spirit said was true, the end of the world would come very soon. Mr. Song also sent his assistant to quickly find Shi Jun and his captives. They needed to make a sacrifice as soon as possible. However, no one had time to move when the estate's gates shattered into pieces. Xiaoyan dramatically entered the scene, dragging with him a piece of trash called Shi Jun. Now Mr. Song didn't need to worry about him not showing up. There was just one problem. Shi Jun arrived in the wrong state. Our hero came to this hornet's nest by himself. Mr. Song was shocked to see his son in such a state. He couldn't even imagine how a loser and poor man like Xiaoyan dared to do such a thing to his son and then come to the family estate, destroying everything in his path. Song immediately ordered the clan to kill this insolent guy. A dozen bandits rushed toward our hero, who could only laugh at their foolishness. He closed his eyes while preparing a fiery greeting for them, and when he opened his eyes again, flames burst out. Xiaoyan tagged each bandit with a mark, and after that, nothing could save them anymore. He moved through their ranks without any problems, and the flames only struck those who tried to stop him. Now he was left alone with the frightened Song, who immediately lost all his arrogance. Behind Xiaoyan, the remnants of the gang were writhing in the flames, and our hero was about to make the main villain pay. But even cornered and terrified, Song wasn't about to give up. He had one last hidden trump card up his sleeve, a gun, and he was going to use it without hesitation. However, just as he pulled the trigger, Xiaoyan used his flame control ability and blew up the gun right in the villain's hand. Mr. Song was injured in both hands, and our hero laughed at him, saying he shouldn't have played with gunpowder. Xiaoyan himself couldn't get enough of his strength. Even though he was of a low level, Void Fire granted him incredible abilities. With it, he could simultaneously control 10 flame sources, each with a volume of up to 10 square meters. But if there were explosives nearby, it could be even more effective. While our hero was contemplating this, Song seized the moment to reach the altar and seek help from the ancestors. The ancestor spirit couldn't allow the Song family's last heir to be destroyed, so it used its flame power to attack Xiaoyan. The power of this flame, amplified by the evil spirits, was so great that even our hero couldn't withstand it. He received substantial damage and was forced to retreat a little. At the same time, the wounds of Mr. Song and the rest of the clan members healed. Now he had regained his confidence and the strength of his ancestors, promising a very quick death for our hero. This time, Xia Yin was up against something far more dangerous than he'd ever faced, a real damn deity. Not just some powerful monster or ancient relic guardian, but an actual god. Honestly, he hadn't seen that coming. All he wanted was to sneak into the Song family's vault, swipe a few ancient treasures, and maybe make a quick buck. But clearly, things had spiraled way out of control. The deity, furious and towering, came at him with deadly intent. One strike was all it would have taken to turn Xia Yin into ash. Luckily, he dodged the first blow, but that thing wasn't done. The god came swinging again, swatting at him like he was a goddamn fly. At one point, it even looked like it had worked. Xia Yin vanished beneath the force of the attack. Mr. Song, watching from the sidelines, started to celebrate. Victory looked certain, but just as fast his smug grin twisted into disbelief, then pure horror. Because not only was Xia Yin still alive, he was riding the damn god like a beast he'd just tamed. So what the hell happened? Let's rewind just a little. Right before the attack, Sadaji had pulled Xia Yin aside and explained the truth. That flaming deity? It was a natural fire spirit, ancient and overflowing with soul power, built up over 1,000 years through the Song family's incense rituals. It was right on the edge of descending to Earth in its true form. If Xia Yin could somehow capture and absorb it, not only would it boost his fire abilities, but it would also feed his soul power, something his token desperately lacked. Of course, there was a catch. To pull this off, Xia Yin had to extract his own soul power and inject it into the token of great crimes. Once charged, he could summon one of the ancient prisoners locked inside. But if he failed, if the Firestar Lord killed him, then the prisoner he summoned could escape freely. Sadaji, always the sly one, asked if he was really willing to take that risk. Xia Yin didn't bother answering. She offered him 2 options, and he picked a third. Without hesitation, he began pouring hellfire straight from his right eye into the token. Sadaji was stunned. This wasn't part of any plan. When she asked what the hell he was doing, Xia Yin made it clear. If he died, the hellfire would destroy the token entirely. No token meant no prison access. The prisoners inside would be sealed forever. No light, no escape. So now, they had no choice but to protect him. Without wasting another second, Xia Yin opened the summoning gate. Inside the prison realm, the ancient captives felt the shift. Panic broke out. Screams, desperate cries, begging voices echoed through the void. But this time, Xia Yin wasn't looking for help from just anyone. He had his sights set on summoning one specific monster, the great demon black bear. The moment the cell doors creaked open, the black bear bolted out like a mad beast. Knowing full well what kind of chaos was about to unfold, Sadaji shouted after him, making it clear. The warden must not die under any circumstances. Once outside, back in the real world, the bear wasted no time. With a thunderous charge, it slammed the fire god to the ground, catching him completely off guard. But more than anything, the bear was just overjoyed to be free again. After being locked up for so long, even the sunlight felt like a blessing. He stood there, paws in the air, waving them around like a kid seeing the sky for the first time. That little moment didn't last long. Xia Yin snapped him back to reality, reminding him that his soul power wouldn't hold up for some long-winded reunion. It was go time. Without hesitation, the black bear nodded, clearly, calling Xia Yin had been the right decision. He rushed the fire god and went in swinging. And honestly, that so-called god didn't stand a damn chance. He was too weak, too slow, and clearly too arrogant to believe a bear could touch him. Every attempt to fight back ended in failure. On top of that, his divine body had crossed a critical limit. He couldn't even use his full strength. Panicking, he tried to flee, but Xia Yin wasn't having any of that. He whipped out the immortal rope and tied the fire deity down like a wild beast. The god's screams echoed through the battlefield, but they meant nothing now. This was a clean, brutal, and absolute win for Xia Yin. The Song family's ancestor, once a divine figure, was now nothing but a bound, defeated failure, just like the rest of his useless descendants. Mr. Song, watching this disaster unfold, fell to the ground in total despair. But as his eyes landed on the immortal rope, a bitter realization hit him. He'd seen it before. It was the very same rope Xia Yin had snatched up from an artifact before buying it. And now, here he was, watching that same rope bind the ancestor his family had worshipped for generations. Xia Yin couldn't help but laugh. The rich fool had basically handed over a treasure capable of binding immortals for free. Mr. Song could only cry like a kid who just lost his favorite toy. The ancestor, once a massive fire spirit, had finally broken down into nothing more than a small spiritual crystal, something Xia Yin now casually held in one hand. The entire Song family's legacy, gone in an instant, now sat in the palm of his hand. And with that kind of power shift, Xia Yin proposed a little deal, one Mr. Song had no chance of refusing. Shi Jun, it turned out, was still alive, though barely holding on. So Xia Yin made his offer. He'd keep Shi Jun breathing, in exchange for every last bit of the Song family's wealth. It was a ruthless move, but Mr. Song was cornered. He knew damn well that once the apocalypse hit, his piles of money would be worth less than dirt. So, in the end, he gave in. Xia Yin took the cash and walked away. Shi Jun was in complete disbelief. The thought of being poor had never even crossed his mind. Yet here they were, everything upside down in an instant. He sat there, stunned, trying to process it all. But Mr. Song remained calm, almost unsettlingly so. He told Shi Jun not to panic, reassuring him that money would soon be worthless anyway. The real priority now was survival, and gathering as many loyal people as possible before things got worse. To the rest of his surviving subordinates, Mr. Song gave clear, sharp instructions. No one was to say a damn word about what had happened here. Instead, they were to sell off every property they owned, quietly, and convert the cash into rice and clean water. Every supply they gathered would be moved to the underground shelter beneath Mr. Song's country villa. It was spacious, secure, and already had a decent stash of weapons. He also told them to reach out to Old Man Huan and buy every ancient artifact they could get their hands on. Mr. Song was fuming, furious that Xia Yin, of all people, had been the first to awaken abilities. The end of the world was clearly creeping closer, but he refused to see it as the end. No, for the Song family, it could be the beginning, an opportunity for total domination. And as for Xia Yin, Mr. Song didn't just want revenge. He was ready to make the bastard's life a living hell. Meanwhile, Xia Yin had his own plans in motion. First stop, the biggest pharmacy in the city. With nearly 29 million in his account, courtesy of the Song family's crumbling empire, he didn't have time to dwell on them anymore. They weren't his concern now. Preparing for the apocalypse was. At the pharmacy, he walked straight up to the counter and ordered 1,000 shanking pills. The pharmacist stared at him like he'd lost his damn mind. After all, who the hell buys 1,000 fever reducers and detox pills in one go? Xia Yin didn't bother explaining. If they didn't have what he needed, he'd take his money elsewhere. That was enough to change her tone. She didn't want to lose a customer, especially not one like him. But even so, she said it would take time, delivery in 2 days. Xia Yin knew the city only had about 10,000 of those pills total, most of which were already sold online. And you might wonder, why hoard so many of a pill no one cares about? Well, when the world starts to burn, that little pill becomes the most precious thing you could have. In his past life, Xia Yin had been infected with the zombie virus. He fought it, suffered through it, but in the end, it didn't matter. Nothing helped. His little sister, Xia Yun, had done everything in her power to save him, scouring the city, desperately searching for a cure. But they hadn't known the truth. The shanking pill was the only medicine that could suppress the virus and, more importantly, trigger ability awakening. By the time they found out, it was too late. The pills were gone. In a final act of love, Xia Yun ignored his pleas to stay put and went to a faraway pharmacy in hopes of finding one last bottle. The world outside was pure chaos by then, lawless and crawling with monsters in human skin. She never made it back. Xia Yin never saw her again. But that was the old timeline. This time, he wasn't going to let history repeat itself. Not again. The Song family, being no fools, already sensed that the end of the world was creeping closer. Naturally, they'd start hoarding food like mad. But Xia Yin wasn't worried about that. In the early stages of the apocalypse, food wasn't even the real prize. What truly mattered were the awakened ones, those rare individuals with supernatural powers. If Xia Yin could get his hands on a stash of shanking pills, he'd be able to unlock multiple abilities, enough to make him a walking army all by himself. Without wasting time, he pulled out his warden's token and commanded Hellfire to ignite. With that single move, he consumed the fire spirit sealed inside the Song family's ancestral estate. The results were immediate. His body surged with power, and just like that, he awakened the might of the Flaming Lotus. Sudaji, ever watchful, took the chance to congratulate him, calling it a successful upgrade. And she wasn't wrong. This power came with serious perks. With the Flaming Lotus, Xia Yin could now tear through barriers and dismantle illusions with ease. Traps like the infamous Wine Lake and Meat Forest? Yeah, they wouldn't be fooling him anymore. And that wasn't even the best part. His fire control reached a new level. He could now shape it with precision, even forming a damn fire sword with ease. Absorbing the fire spirit had turned out to be far more valuable than he'd anticipated. And the ability didn't just stop at one fancy sword. This was only the beginning. Once he stepped into the dungeon, all eyes were on him. Black Bear and Sudaji both started vying for his attention like kids fighting over candy. The reason? This dungeon operated on a sin karma system. Every time a prisoner helped the warden, their sin points dropped, and in return, their prison conditions improved. Case in point, Black Bear had just dropped his sin karma to 90 by helping fight a fire spirit ancestor and got an extra serving of meat as a reward. But Xia Yin wasn't exactly thrilled by all the sudden affection. He shoved them off, annoyed by the clinginess. From the shadows, the Thunder Raven watched everything with disdain. He scoffed at the pathetic prisoners groveling for scraps and warned Xia Yin not to even think about summoning him. If he did, he'd regret it, because the Thunder Raven had no intention of obeying anyone. He'd just break out and vanish. But Xia Yin didn't lose sleep over the threat. He knew that as his power grew, he'd unlock the next floor, filled with even stronger prisoners. When that time came, the Thunder Raven wouldn't be posturing anymore. He'd be begging for a chance to be used. With his strength growing steadily, the warden's token pulsed with energy. Good timing, too. The blood moon loomed larger with every passing day, a clear sign the apocalypse was on a fast track. If Xia Yin wanted to be ready, he'd need to burn through the rest of his money, and fast. The next day, Xia Yin made his way to the jewelry auction. He had only one goal in mind, to get his hands on a very specific artifact. In the coming apocalypse, ordinary resources would be looted in no time, but those didn't matter nearly as much as ability enhancement cores. Rare treasures that could either be obtained by killing zombies or stumbling upon unique artifacts like the one up for bidding today. In his previous life, some lucky bastard had gotten that very stone early and leveled up way ahead of everyone else, gaining all sorts of unfair advantages. But this time, that lucky guy was going to be Xia Yin. A few hours later, the stone was finally brought out. The starting bid? 3 million. Experts had already claimed it was loaded with potential, raw jadeite inside that could easily be worth 5 million. Bids started climbing fast, reaching 4 million in no time. But then, some rich blondie, clearly used to having his way, casually threw down a 5 million bid, killing everyone else's interest on the spot. No one wanted to cross him. After all, the guy owned one of the biggest companies in China. As a reward for backing off, he even invited the crowd for drinks next time. Typical power play. That's when Xia Yin stepped into the room and raised the bid to 6 million without blinking. Silence followed. People started whispering, confused about where this random student came from and how the hell he could afford a bid like that. One of the auction organizers rushed over, reminding him of their exclusive membership rules. Participants needed a black bank card to prove they weren't wasting anyone's time. No problem. Xia Yin casually pulled out his own black card, tens of millions sitting in his account. And just like that, the organizer's tone flipped from cocky to respectful. The auction resumed. The girl at the podium asked if anyone wanted to bid higher. Of course, Blondie wasn't backing down that easily. He raised it to 7 million. But Xia Yin didn't even flinch. He immediately dropped a 10 million bid. The room was stunned. That offer went way beyond the actual value of the processed jade inside. The girl next to Blondie leaned in and told him to stop trying to compare manhood with some random loser pretending to be rich. And surprisingly, Blondie actually listened. He backed down, but not without a final word. He asked for Xia Yan's name, swearing he'd remember it, and that next time, the victory would be his. But Xia Yan wasn't bothered. He'd gotten what he came for. Just holding the container with the stone gave off a power that sent heat pulsing through his veins. His eyes lit up with red flames. There was nothing left for him to do here, so he turned and headed for the exit. Behind him, the next lot was being introduced, an ancient feather fan inlaid with rare gems. But just as Xia Yan reached the door, screams erupted across the room. Panic spread fast. People were begging for help as a massive spirit snake burst out of the fan. This thing was monstrous, almost human-faced, and headed straight for Xia Yan, ignoring everyone else. He quickly guessed what had happened. The artifact must have absorbed some of the energy from his stone before the auction, awakening this creature. And with the apocalypse drawing near, the spirit's power had only grown stronger. Strange, supernatural incidents like this were just the first signs of the coming collapse. To his credit, Blondie wasn't a complete coward. Instead of running like the others, he grabbed a fancy telescopic stick and tried to strike the snake. It didn't even notice. The thing rushed straight towards Xia Yan. But Xia Yan didn't move an inch. He calmly caught the snake by the neck and slapped a fire collar around it. With his enhanced flame control, taming this overgrown spirit was child's play. He activated his lotus flame, and fire began eating away at the creature's shell. In seconds, it was over. All that remained was a spirit crystal. If Xia Yan absorbed it, he could gain a new ability, though judging by the weak level of the spirit, it would probably be a minor one. He was just about to leave when Blondie suddenly dropped to his knees behind him. The guy had seen enough to know real power when he saw it. He begged Xia Yan to take him in as a disciple, to learn, to grow, to gain that kind of strength. But hey, all a good time. A few hours later, the entire front of Xia Yan's house was packed with boxes, crates, and cages full of animals. It looked like a damn zoo mixed with a small trading post. Naturally, it didn't take long before the neighbors started gathering around, their curious eyes darting from one package to another, whispering among themselves. They were all trying to figure out the same thing. How the hell did Xia Yan suddenly get so loaded? Most of them assumed he was starting some kind of business. A pet shop maybe, or a general store. Whatever it was, a good chunk of the neighborhood seemed genuinely happy for him. But of course, not everyone was clapping. There's always that one bitter soul in every neighborhood, and here, that honor went to Annie Jiang. She was fuming, not because Xia Yan was doing well, but because she had her greedy little eyes set on his warehouse. She had been dreaming about converting it into her own shop, and now here he was ruining her not-so-secret plan. Not that she'd ever admit it. Out loud, she scoffed, acting like Cheyenne didn't have what it took to run a business anyway. Just then, Cheyenne strolled back in. He didn't even glance at the growing crowd outside his house. He was too busy mentally calculating what else he could buy with the leftover cash after stocking up. When he got closer, the delivery guy informed him that everything had been dropped off and asked if he wanted to count it all. Cheyenne wasn't about to waste time nitpicking crates. Besides, another truckload was due tomorrow, and judging by how much stuff he'd already hoarded, there was no way it was all going to fit in that warehouse. At least, that's what the delivery team assumed. Wanting to keep a low profile about his, let's say, unique abilities, Cheyenne decided he'd just go pick up the rest from their central warehouse himself the next day. No more curious eyes watching. But unfortunately for him, Annie Jang had been eavesdropping the entire time. And boy, she was shaking. With rage. With jealousy. With pure, burning envy. She couldn't wrap her head around how this kid, an orphan who lost his parents ages ago, was suddenly doing better than her. How dare he? That warehouse was supposed to be hers. As if the scene wasn't ridiculous enough, her little gremlin of a grandson decided he needed to pee. And naturally, instead of finding a bathroom like a normal child, he waddled straight over to Cheyenne's boxes and let it all out. Shameless little brat. What made it worse? Annie Jang actually praised him, said he was small and could do whatever he wanted. She even had the nerve to try and justify it to Cheyenne. But Cheyenne wasn't having any of it. He grabbed the kid by the collar, marched him right back to the old hag, and dumped him there. Of course, Karma had a sense of humor. The kid gave his own grandma a golden shower on the way back. Beautiful. Annie Jang lost it. She yelled that Cheyenne couldn't treat a child like that. Said he was just playing. The boy, right on cue, started bawling like a little demon. But none of it fazed Cheyenne. This was his stuff, his property, and these people had no business being anywhere near it. Without another word, he slammed the gate in their faces. Annie Jang stood there, seething, her fists clenched, her eye twitching. She wanted revenge, and not the subtle kind. Her grandson, being the little menace he was, started talking about playing with firecrackers to scare the neighbors. That's when inspiration struck. A twisted little plan formed in her mind. She'd buy a bunch of firecrackers, not just for the kid, but for herself too. That evening, they put on a fire show so wild, some accidental sparks would surely hit Cheyenne's warehouse. Maybe even set the whole thing ablaze. And she couldn't wait to see his face when it all went up in flames. Meanwhile, our guy had locked himself away in the warehouse, safely hidden from nosy neighbors and unwanted attention. With methodical precision, he began moving all the boxes and cages straight into his personal little prison. Sadaji, the cunning fox she was, welcomed the incoming supplies with a gleeful grin. Not because she cared about stocking up for the apocalypse. Oh no, she had her eyes on one thing. The chickens. Finally, a chance to sink her teeth into Cheyenne's prized poultry. Shen, of course, was blissfully unaware of her delicious little plan. He simply instructed her to place all the supplies into the empty cells. Ever confident, Sadaji considered herself a pro at storage logistics. She even suggested he set up an animal zone near the tower, because if the beasts soaked in the tower's aura, their meat would become even more mouth-watering. A never-ending supply of gourmet chicken? She was all in. Her suggestion sparked a new idea in Cheyenne's head, an even smarter one. With the end of the world creeping closer, nobody knew how long they'd be stuck surviving like this. So instead of just hoarding meat, why not diversify? Bring in all kinds of animals, create a self-sustaining ecosystem inside the prison. That way, when civilization inevitably collapsed, they'd have a head start. Hearing this, the black bear chimed in, saying Cheyenne shouldn't stop at animals. If he wanted real long-term survival, he'd need edible plants too. But that required seeds and fertile soil. Stockpiles would run out eventually, after all. Luckily, Cheyenne wasn't completely hopeless. He had already bought plenty of seeds in advance. The real issue was the barren wasteland surrounding the dungeon, dry, cracked, and completely useless for farming. But then, the idea struck. What if he just brought in good soil from the real world? Wasting no time, Cheyenne made his way to the nearest suburb and picked an empty field. He began testing how much real-world land his prison could absorb. And once he saw it worked, he went absolutely nuts, gathering as much soil as his ability could carry. Sadaji, seeing an avalanche of dirt flooding in, panicked. She screamed for him to stop, sensing this wouldn't end well. And she was right, no one listened. She was nearly buried alive under the mountain of soil. Her strength wasn't enough to dig herself out, and the limited space was quickly filling up. Still, Cheyenne managed to bring in over 200 tons of soil. It didn't feel like enough to him, but he understood something others didn't. Once the apocalypse began, fertile land would be more precious than gold. And right now, there was no time to waste. Meanwhile, trouble was brewing next door. His nosy neighbor, Aunt Jang, had finally snapped. That evil old bat started hatching her next plan. She bought an entire box of firecrackers, dead set on watching Cheyenne's warehouse go up in flames. But just as she was about to set her plan in motion, her grandson ran up to her, holding an antique mirror. He told her someone inside the mirror really wanted to meet her. She didn't question where he got it, probably stolen from the same store they bought the firecrackers. But instead of scolding him, she praised the little devil for bringing gifts to his grandma. Seriously, something was very wrong with that family. The boy insisted she look into the mirror, and when she did, everything changed. Staring back at her wasn't her reflection. It was something else. A demon pulled straight from ancient nightmares. Except this one was far too real. Aunt Jang screamed and hurled the mirror away in terror. But her grandson, clearly unhinged, rushed to retrieve it, insisting she loved her reflection too much to leave it behind. He made her look again, and this time, the demon broke through. It found its host. Aunt Jang was perfect, rotten to the core, a mirror image of the darkness it needed. The thing took her over in a heartbeat. Her grandson, thinking it was all a twisted game, laughed like a lunatic. But the games were over. Grandma wasn't grandma anymore. And her grandson, well, he got to be her very first victim. The apocalypse had begun. The blood moon had swelled to its fullest, casting an eerie crimson glow across the sky, freezing the earth in its grip and marking the arrival of countless ghosts and demons, all here to punish the rotten remains of humanity. But not everyone had caught on yet. On the coast, near the port warehouses, the last rays of sunlight still managed to pierce through the thick black clouds. Life, somehow, dragged on as usual. A fishing boat docked at the port, and what it brought shocked everyone. The entire catch was mutated, twisted, disgusting creatures covered in pus, fangs, and something that looked like rot. The fishermen stood there, stunned. They had no clue about the end of the world brewing around them. To them, it was probably just the usual sewage and sea pollution doing its thing again. Inside one of the warehouses, a loader showed up to collect the goods. But the warehouse manager was acting weird, too weird. He wasn't responding, just sitting there like a frightened corpse, eyes hollow, body frozen. Something was off, real off. The loader figured maybe the poor guy caught the flu or something and casually suggested he take a break and go home. He had no idea he was talking to ticking time bomb. That's when the heavy sound of footsteps echoed through the warehouse. A group of men in black suits stormed in, not wasting a second. They demanded shanking pills. The loader, still trying to do his job, explained that all the stock had already been sold. If they wanted to buy, they'd need to contact the sales manager and place an official order. But these guys weren't here for polite transactions. They didn't give a damn about procedure. Without warning, one of them grabbed the loader by the shoulder and flung him like a rag doll, straight onto the sick manager. That's when things snapped. The manager, now fully lost to whatever monster he had become, lunged with inhuman strength, clawing at the man's leg and sending him crashing to the ground. His transformation was complete, a full-blown zombie, crazed and savage. The rest of the men reacted fast, pulling out their weapons. One of them wielded a shovel, because hey, when it comes to zombies, a shovel never disappoints. Together, they managed to beat the monster down and free their fallen comrade. The threat was neutralized, or so they thought. No one really understood what had just happened. What mattered now was the mission. But the gang leader who got clawed wasn't out of danger. Deep in his leg, the infection was already spreading. The zombie virus had entered him. Still, he didn't flinch. No whining, no panic. His only focus was to follow the damn order and secure the medicine. And if anyone got in their way now, well, they'd be erased. No questions asked. Out of nowhere, a voice rang out from the entrance. No one had expected visitors, especially not now. It was Cheyenne, calm, sharp-eyed, and clearly pissed. He had come to collect the pills he paid for with his own damn money, and here these lowlifes were, trying to steal them like the world had already ended. Newsflash, it hadn't. Not fully. And these idiots were already sprinting toward death. But the gang leader saw things differently. According to him, the entire logistics port and all the surrounding buildings belonged to his boss. Since the goods hadn't officially left the port, he suggested Cheyenne just cancel his order and walk away. In exchange, they'd offer him whatever compensation he wanted. A tempting offer for some, but not for Cheyenne. He wasn't about to sell off life-saving meds for a few bucks that would be worthless in a week. Without wasting time, Cheyenne gave them 1 minute to leave the warehouse, warning them that if they stuck around, they'd be facing some very, very unpleasant consequences. His eyes drifted to the lifeless body of the warehouse manager nearby. So, the zombies had already made it here. That meant time was running out even faster than he thought. But unfortunately, the thugs didn't have enough brain cells to realize the danger. Instead, they tried to jump him, even attacking from behind. None of them managed to lay so much as a finger on Cheyenne. He moved like a ghost, too fast for any of them to track. They looked around in confusion, trying to spot him, but it was like he'd vanished into thin air. Then Cheyenne calmly opened one of the crates, stuffed full of food, and decided that since they claimed everything here belonged to their boss, he might as well take it all with him, as punishment for their stupidity. Terrified, the gang leader asked what the hell he wanted, but Cheyenne didn't bother explaining. He had simply flipped the game. If they were planning to rob him, then he'd rob them first. That was the new reality. They tried to resist, but Cheyenne's flames burned through them with no mercy. After a couple of hours, what was left of the gang limped back to their boss, battered, burned, and broken. And their boss? Well, she wasn't just any boss. She was something else entirely, and she was livid. Not only had her men failed to bring back the pills, but they had also lost every last bit of the other goods. Trying to justify himself, the gang leader stammered that the man who wrecked them wasn't just anyone. He had superpowers. Said he wasn't human. He was a damn monster. By the time they returned to the warehouse and finally managed to open the door, the place was already cleaned out. There had been so much stuff inside, but now, nothing. Not even a crumb. It was like a ghost had swept through it. But the only thing the woman cared about now was the name of the guy who did this. One of her men had managed to dig into the order records. His name was Cheyenne. She paused at that. So, she wasn't the only one with abilities. And a man with spatial storage? That kind of power, she wanted it. Before she could act on that thought, the gang leader who just crawled back began shaking violently. Then he growled, low and guttural, before dropping to the floor. The zombie virus had finally won. But the woman didn't flinch. Not even a step back. Instead, she calmly stated that the virus had already reached his brain. No medicine could save him now. Without hesitation, she ordered the others to burn him, and warned them, stay the hell away from his blood. But then, just as they moved in, the man jolted upright and charged straight at her. It looked like it was over, but she didn't run. Instead, she summoned magic with a flick of her hand. In the next second, dozens of living branches burst into the room and skewered the infected man before he could touch her. That's when everyone understood why she'd stayed so calm. She had power too. Serious power. Once it was over, she looked at her stunned subordinates and told them to toughen up. This was just the beginning. From now on, they were to focus on one thing: gathering medicine, stockpiling weapons, and using the warehouse as a base. Because the hell that was coming? She knew it far too well. At the same time, Cheyenne was giving her brother a confused look as she held up the bottle of shanking pills. She asked why the hell he brought those, and Cheyenne calmly told her that from now on, they'd only be drinking mineral water and popping 3 of those pills a day. The water and air were no longer pure, he said. If she suddenly felt cold or off, she needed to let him know immediately. Shin, obviously weirded out, asked what was going on. None of it made sense to her. And honestly, Cheyenne figured it was about time she got the full story anyway. He promised to explain everything during their walk. The apocalypse hadn't fully kicked in yet, but the signs were already creeping in. There was this strange, eerie tension in the air, and even Cheyenne, who usually never noticed anything, could feel it clearly. The reason? Demons. They were starting to appear, and not just in far-off corners of the world. Nope, they were right next door. From a neighboring apartment, strange, disturbing sounds had already started. Aunt Jang, a sweet old lady just days ago, had turned into a zombie demon and eaten her own grandson. Whatever humanity she had was gone. She burst out of her apartment, screaming curses and hell-bent on destruction, her mind twisted by endless greed. Moments later, gut-wrenching screams echoed through the building. Meanwhile, Cheyenne were already getting into a cab. Just across the street, Ruolin and her mother happened to be walking by. Ruolin, conniving as ever, was proudly showing off the house she planned to live in with Cheyenne. She still believed she could win him back. After all, she'd borrowed a small fortune and spent it on the most expensive plastic surgery in the country. In her delusional mind, she figured that now Cheyenne wouldn't be able to resist her. The only reason she went through all that Because Xiaoyan had suddenly become strong. Ridiculously strong. If she could reel him back in, his power would be hers to use. And then she saw him. Xiaoyan, getting into a cab, headed somewhere unknown. Her eyes lit up. He was a treasure she couldn't afford to lose. Without even thinking, she and her equally greedy mother started following the cab. Xiaoyan and Xiaoyun's destination? The zoo. And the place was already showing signs that something was off. Normally calm animals were now acting hostile, restless, and just wrong. On the way there, Xiaoyan had explained to his sister that the world was on the brink of collapse. Soon, people would either become monsters or awaken powers. What he didn't tell her was the real source of his knowledge. In truth, it came from a painful memory, his previous life. Instead, he claimed he had awakened early and could see glimpses of the future. That was enough to convince Xiaoyun. Realizing the danger, she asked why they'd come to the zoo instead of hiding somewhere safe. Xiaoyun's answer was simple. Hiding wouldn't solve anything. If they wanted to survive in the hell to come, they needed to be strong. Sure, he already had enough power, but he couldn't stay by her side forever. If something happened, she needed to defend herself. In other words, it was time for her to awaken too. The idea of gaining powers and fighting back made Xiaoyun light up. She didn't want to be a burden. Not anymore. The zoo itself seemed like a strange choice, but Xiaoyun had his reasons. And soon, they'd become clear. All this time, Ruolin and her mother had been trailing behind, watching. They had no clue why Xiaoyun came to the zoo, but honestly, they didn't care. All that mattered was creating a chance encounter where Ruolin could dazzle him with her new, store-bought beauty. Before the meeting, Ruolin stopped near the llama enclosure to fix her makeup. But one look into those llama's glowing red eyes? Yeah, this wasn't going to end well. Meanwhile, Xiaoyan and his sister arrived at Turtle Park. The moment they stepped in, Sadaji immediately paused, saying she felt something unusual about this place. Black Bear wasn't quiet either. He scoffed at the idea of turtles, clearly not a fan. In his opinion, turtles were tough as hell, annoying to fight, and lived way longer than they should. Eventually, they reached the heart of the park, the place where the oldest turtle in all of China and possibly the world lived. This one was ancient. So ancient, even Sadaji and Black Bear recognized it. Xiaoyan knew the story. This turtle had been here since the zoo's opening, which meant it was easily over 100 years old. It had even been given a name. A sign hung nearby, proudly labeling it as Nanny. Yeah, not exactly the fierce, mystical name one would expect. But despite the soft name, this turtle had history. In its past life, it had gone toe-to-toe with a demon who tried to seize the zoo after the apocalypse broke out. That demon didn't make it far. The turtle bit him, literally. Their battle dragged on for days, but no matter what the demon tried, he couldn't crack that shell. In the end, the demon gave up and retreated. Xiaoyan figured if there was one creature that could keep his sister safe, it was this old beast. He approached the turtle and asked for its help, but got nothing in return. Just a long, blank stare. No response. No movement. So, Xiaoyan switched tactics. He lit his lotus flame and casually mentioned how tired he was from the walk, and how he might just cook up some turtle soup. That got the old one's attention. Suddenly, the turtle moved, clearly irritated. It even spoke, grumbling that humans were the most impatient, annoying creatures around. Threatening someone just because they didn't answer fast enough? Rude as hell. Still, since they were already here, he was willing to hear them out. Xiaoyan quickly explained that the apocalypse was right around the corner and there wasn't much time left. He asked the turtle to protect his younger sister. Xiaoyan was shocked, not only that the turtle could talk, but also that its name was actually Nanny. The turtle sighed, saying it was a long story. More than a century ago, it had saved a drowning girl at sea. That same girl later built this zoo, and she was the one who named him Nanny. An unfortunate accident, and one that stuck for over 100 years. But for a turtle with a 3,000-year lifespan, that was barely a blink. Of course, the moment Sadaji and Black Bear realized the turtle was that old, their eyes lit up with greed. Devouring the spirit of such a beast would easily extend their lives by hundreds of years. But Xiaoyan shut that idea down immediately. There was no way he'd let them touch this ancient guardian. Once again, Xiaoyan asked the turtle to protect his sister and wanted to know what conditions he'd have to meet. The ancient turtle, still staring up at the blood moon and sensing the chaos rising, thought for a while. He knew damn well that when the end of the world came, even turtles wouldn't be spared. That's when Xiaoyan made an offer. He suggested moving all the turtles from this pond into the demon suppression tower. He could build a pond inside and raise them into majestic beings like this one. But the moment the tower was mentioned, the turtles' eyes lit up with pure rage. He remembered that place all too well. The prison, the seal, and most of all, the one who created it. At the very top of that tower was the being who once ruled the world, and this ancient turtle had once served him loyally. That's why he stayed here all these years, not just to chill, but to wait. To wait for the one worthy enough to hold the key to the demon suppression tower. But looking at Cheyenne now, the turtle wasn't so sure. He doubted a boy this young could handle something that dangerous. If he failed, he'd end up releasing horrors so powerful that the current apocalypse would feel like child's play. So, the turtle gave him a test. If Cheyenne wanted to prove himself as the warden, he had to bear the weight of 3,000 years of turtle life. And Cheyenne accepted. As the ancient turtle stepped forward, the sheer pressure of its presence slammed down on him. He activated the lotus flame, bracing himself as the ground beneath his feet began to crack and sink. The weight kept increasing, and for a moment, it felt like the whole dam park was about to collapse. Elsewhere, Rulan sensed something powerful happening. She knew Cheyenne was involved and tried to rush toward it. But before she could take 2 steps, her wig got ripped off, along with a chunk of her hair. Completely caught off guard, she froze. The red-eyed llama nearby looked at her with disgust. Apparently, it figured it was about time this gold digger showed her true self. Rulan tried bribing the llama with her purse, threats, and whatever drama she could come up with. But the only response she got was a mouthful of spit right in the face. Let's just say, it was the final touch to her look that day. She got exactly what she deserved.